the Gulf states and Turkey powers and their influence in Somali politics and natural resources. Today, we uncover the growing influence of Gulf powers in Turkey in Somali politics and natural resources. Why are these nations so invested in Somalia's future? What are they gaining and what is Somalia risking? Let's explore. Historical background. Somalia's strategic location on the Horn of Africa, where the Red Sea meets the Indian Ocean, has long attracted foreign interest. In ancient times, it was part of the trade networks linking Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. During the colonial period, European powers took control, but the Gulf and Turkey never lost interest. They maintained religious, cultural, and economic ties that would grow stronger after Somalia's state collapse in 1991. As Somalia began rebuilding in the 2000s, foreign actors returned not just as aid donors, but as stakeholders in Somalia's political destiny and its untapped wealth. The Gulf states' competition. The Gulf countries, especially the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, are also vying for influence in Somalia, but unlike Turkey, their rivalry is more fragmented and politically charged. The UAE has supported security forces in Puntland and Somaliland, invested in Berbera Port, Bosaso Port, and sought long-term port access for its shipping lines. At the same time, it has been accused of fueling divisions within Somalia's federal system by bypassing the central government in Mogadishu. Qatar, on the other hand, aligned itself with the previous Somali federal government and backed political figures sympathetic to its interests. Both countries have used financial aid, political lobbying, and media to assert their influence, especially during Somalia's highly contested elections. This Gulf rivalry, mirroring the wider Saudi-Qatar dispute, has complicated Somalia's political landscape, making internal unity even harder to achieve. Turkey's rise in Somalia. Turkey's involvement in Somalia began in earnest in 2011, when then Prime Minister Erdogan made a historic visit during a severe famine. That trip marked a turning point. Turkey invested heavily building hospitals, schools, roads, and even its largest overseas embassy in Mogadishu. But Turkey's influence is not just humanitarian. It has trained Somali soldiers, managed the port of Mogadishu through the Turkish company Al Bayrak, and helped modernize security institutions. Furthermore, Turkey has been involved in the development and management of Somalia's airports, contributing to improved transportation networks. Turkish Airlines became the first major international carrier to fly directly to Mogadishu. All of these steps have made Turkey a dominant player in Somali development and politics. Behind these investments is a strategic agenda. Turkey is seeking a long-term presence in the Red Sea zone, and Somalia gives it access to maritime routes, commercial opportunities, and geopolitical leverage, natural resources, and foreign interest. Beneath the surface of politics lies an even more crucial factor: natural resources. Somalia is rich in oil and gas reserves, especially offshore. The potential hydrocarbon wealth in the Somali basin has attracted keen interest from Gulf states and Turkey alike. Turkish companies have been granted exploration rights in Somali waters, and energy cooperation agreements are already in place. Meanwhile, Gulf states have offered infrastructure and port investments in return for access to resource corridors. In addition to oil and gas, Somalia's fertile lands, fisheries, and livestock trade are vital resources that these powers are eyeing. The UAE, for instance, imports Somali livestock and is investing in agricultural logistics. Turkey, too, has launched agricultural training programs and irrigation support initiatives. The concern is, will Somalia benefit equitably from these resources, or will foreign interests dominate the sectors before Somalia can fully regulate them? Turkey's grip on Somalia's offshore oil. Recent reports, particularly from investigative platforms like Nordic Monitor and the Arab Weekly, have raised serious questions about the depth of Turkey's influence over Somalia's offshore oil reserves. According to these reports, Turkey has secured control over up to 90% of Somalia's offshore oil exploration and drilling rights under agreements that heavily favor Turkish interests. So, how did this happen? It began with Turkey positioning itself not just as a development partner, but as a trusted friend to the Somali government. By offering aid, building infrastructure, and supporting political leaders, Turkey developed a relationship that bypassed public debate and institutional oversight. As Somalia struggled with internal instability, constitutional uncertainty, and a weak oil regulatory framework, Turkey took the lead in energy negotiations. The key moment came in 2020, when Somalia passed a controversial petroleum law, a move seen by many critics as hasty and under foreign pressure. Just 2 years later, Turkish state-linked companies were granted significant offshore blocks located in the Indian Ocean, where seismic studies had shown great hydrocarbon potential. According to Nordic Monitor, the terms of these deals lack transparency and place little control in the hands of the Somali government. Somali officials reportedly have limited access to contractual details, and local agencies lack the capacity to monitor offshore drilling operations. Turkey, through its energy companies, handles the exploration, extraction, and exportation process, raising fears that Somalia is being sidelined from its own natural wealth. The deal includes transportation, distribution, refining, sales and services operations of oil and other products from land and sea projects. The strategic and ethical dilemma. What does this mean for Somalia? It's a classic case of asymmetrical power dynamics. Turkey has capitalized on Somalia's institutional weakness to secure long-term control of a resource that should be a pillar of national development. And while Turkish officials argue that this is a win-win partnership, the reality as described by critics is one of dependency and domination. Somali civil society, youth groups, and diaspora voices have started to push back. They are demanding transparency, accountability, and renegotiation of all foreign energy deals. They argue that no country should control 90% of another's natural resources, especially when poverty remains widespread and infrastructure underdeveloped. This situation also poses a moral dilemma. Should foreign allies exploit vulnerabilities in return for influence? Or should they support Somalia in building the capacity to manage its own wealth? The military clause, protecting oil or asserting power. In addition to economic rights, Turkey has secured responsibility for the maritime security of the oil-rich Somali offshore zones. This means Turkish naval vessels and special forces may be deployed to patrol Somalia's waters. On paper, it's about protection defending oil installations from pirates and threats. In reality, it represents a dramatic expansion of Turkish influence, just a few nautical miles from the strategic Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the world's busiest maritime choke points. The 90% question. A deal of inequality across Africa. Oil-producing countries typically secure 40% to 60% of revenues from their natural resources after cost recovery by foreign companies. Ghana's Jubilee oil field? Ghana gets 55%. Nigeria's Bonga project? Nigeria retains 53%. But Somalia, under this deal, receives only 5%, with no clarity on when that share might increase. For many Somalis, this is not a partnership, it's a form of economic surrender. Turkey's biggest strategy: energy, influence, and power. This oil deal fits into a much larger pattern. Turkey's growing influence across Africa. From building military bases to signing energy deals, Turkey is crafting a new sphere of influence far beyond its borders. With footholds in Libya, Sudan, Qatar, and now Somalia, Turkey is positioning itself as a major player in the Red Sea, and Indian Ocean corridors crucial for controlling global trade and energy flows. This is not just about oil, it's about power, positioning, and future global relevance. Aerial shots of Somalia's coastline, oil rigs at sea, Turkish flags, Somali ports. Off the coast of East Africa, a massive energy shift is underway. Somalia, long associated with conflict, piracy, and humanitarian struggles, may soon become one of the most oil-rich nations in Africa. And right in the center of it all is Turkey. A bold new agreement between Somalia and Turkey has just been revealed, granting Turkey unprecedented rights to explore and control Somalia's oil. Can Somalia cancel or renegotiate the offshore oil deal with Turkey? Yes, Somalia has the legal and sovereign right to cancel or renegotiate the offshore oil deal with Turkey, especially if the agreement is found to be exploitative, unconstitutional, or lacking proper legal procedures. However, doing so would involve navigating a complex landscape of legal obligations, international diplomacy, and domestic political dynamics. Legal framework and sovereign rights. Somalia, as a sovereign nation, has the authority to review, revise, or revoke contracts that are not in the public interest. Under the Somali Petroleum Law of 2020, all hydrocarbon resources belong to the Somali people. The law mandates that all oil contracts must be approved by the Somali federal government through the Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, supervised by the Somali Petroleum Authority, SPA, consistent with the National Resource Sharing Framework between federal and regional authorities. If the Turkey-Somalia offshore oil deal reportedly granting Turkey control over 90% of production revenues or rights was not ratified in compliance with these requirements, or if it undermines national interests, then it could be legally challenged or nullified. Furthermore, Somalia can invoke the doctrine of sovereignty over natural resources, recognized under international law, which allows countries to control and manage their resources without external interference, provided they respect existing contracts in good faith. Grounds for cancellation or renegotiation? Somalia may have several legitimate grounds to either cancel or seek renegotiation of the deal. Lack of transparency or legal oversight. If the agreement was signed without full parliamentary oversight, proper review by the SPA, or without involvement of federal member states, it may be considered invalid. Unfair or exploitative terms. A deal where a foreign country controls 90% of the revenues or production is widely seen as exploitative, especially in a country like Somalia that is striving for equitable development and poverty reduction. Such deals often lead to political backlash and legal reassessment. Violation of the Resource Sharing Agreement. Under a 2018 agreement, Somalia's federal government must share resource revenues with member states. Any deal that ignores this arrangement could be challenged constitutionally. Public or political opposition. If the deal becomes politically toxic due to public dissatisfaction or opposition from influential regional leaders, the government may be pressured to renegotiate or withdraw. International and diplomatic implications. Canceling a signed deal with Turkey, especially one involving Turkish Petroleum, TPAO, a state-owned entity, would not be without consequences. Diplomatic repercussions. Turkey is a major strategic ally of Somalia, offering military, development, and infrastructure support. Revoking the deal could strain bilateral relations and reduce future cooperation. Investor risk perception. A sudden cancellation could discourage other international oil and gas firms from entering Somalia's nascent energy sector, fearing political instability or contract insecurity. Legal arbitration. Turkey may choose to pursue international arbitration or litigation for breach of contract, which could lead to compensation demands or reputational damage for Somalia in global investment circles. That said, there are precedents across Africa where countries have successfully revised or nullified one-sided natural resource contracts. Governments and nations, such as Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zambia, have reviewed resource deals that were signed under questionable circumstances and renegotiated them to secure better terms for their citizens. Strategic path forward. If Somalia seeks to revise the deal, it can do so through a combination of legal, diplomatic, and political strategies. Legal audit. Initiate an independent legal and financial audit of the agreement to assess its validity and fairness. Renegotiation talks. Approach Turkey diplomatically to renegotiate the terms, aiming for a more equitable revenue sharing model, e.g., 50-50 or 60-40 split. Public transparency. Involve the public and federal member states in the process to build national consensus and legitimacy. Multilateral engagement. Engage neutral international bodies or mediators to oversee the renegotiation and avoid conflict. The story of Somalia's offshore oil is a test case for the country's sovereignty. If Turkey or any foreign actor walks away with the lion's share of Somali wealth, then the true cost of foreign aid and friendship will be revealed. But it doesn't have to end this way. Somalia can learn from this moment. It can rise, reorganize, and reclaim its place as a powerful nation, not just geographically, but economically and politically. The journey to full independence starts with resource control, in this case Somalia, to reclaim control over its natural resources. In summary, Somalia can cancel or renegotiate the Turkey offshore oil deal, especially if it violates national interests, legal procedures, or constitutional frameworks. However, this must be done carefully to avoid international backlash, legal disputes, and diplomatic fallout. The goal should be to secure a fairer deal that respects Somalia's sovereignty, ensures transparency, and delivers lasting benefits to its people. Political consequences. These competing influences have profound implications for Somali politics. On one hand, foreign investments provide much-needed development, jobs, and training. On the other hand, they risk entrenching divisions, undermining sovereignty, and turning Somali politics into a battleground for foreign rivalries. Federal states like Puntland and Jubaland sometimes align with Gulf powers independently, while the federal government may lean towards Turkey or Qatar, creating friction in policymaking and constitutional reforms. Moreover, Somalia's delayed elections, controversies over resource laws, and weak institutions make it easier for external actors to manipulate outcomes. The question then arises, is Somalia truly shaping its own future, or is it being shaped by others? The way forward Somalia stands at a crossroads. The path to sovereignty and sustainable development depends on building strong, transparent institutions capable of managing both domestic governance and foreign relations. Somalia must craft a unified national policy on foreign investment, especially in strategic sectors like oil, ports, and agriculture. It must insist on fair partnerships where Somali people benefit, not just foreign companies or political elites. Regional cooperation is key. If Somalia can position itself as a neutral trade and diplomacy hub working with all external partners without becoming a proxy, it could transform foreign rivalry into opportunity. Somalia's future is still being written. Gulf states and Turkey powers are shaping its political and economic environment. But the ultimate direction lies in Somali hands. Will foreign investment lead to prosperity or dependency? Will politics remain fragmented, or will national unity prevail? These are questions every Somali and every observer must ask. What Somalia must do next? For Somalia to reclaim control over its natural resources, several key steps are essential. 1. Renegotiation of oil agreements. All contracts signed in secrecy or without parliamentary review must be reopened and revised with public oversight. 2. Strengthening Somali institutions. From the Ministry of Petroleum to the Auditor General's Office, Somalia must invest in training and oversight mechanisms. 3. Establishing a sovereign wealth fund, modeled after countries like Norway or Botswana. This fund would ensure that oil profits benefit all Somali citizens, not just elites or foreign companies. 4. Regional and international advocacy. Somalia needs to work with the African Union, IGAD, and the UN to build legal protections and advocate for fairer deals. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep insights into the politics and power dynamics of Africa and beyond.